Laura had always dreamed of moving into a house of her own, away from the hustle of city life. So, when she found the old Victorian house on the outskirts of town, she was eager to make it her own. The house was stunning, with its tall windows, intricate woodwork, and dark, creaky floors. However, from the moment she stepped through the front door, something felt off, an unease that she couldn't explain. It wasn't the house itself. It was the silence. It was almost as if the house was waiting for something. The first few nights were uneventful. Laura settled into her new routine, unpacking her belongings, painting the walls, and attempting to make the place feel more like home. But as the days went by, she began to notice strange things, whispers in the middle of the night, soft scratching sounds coming from the walls. At first, she thought it was just the house settling or the wind blowing through the old pipes, but the noises grew louder, more persistent. One evening, as Laura sat on the couch reading, the scratching started again. It was faint at first, just a soft noise against the wall near her kitchen. She ignored it, but it soon grew louder, closer, and then it stopped. A moment later, a voice, almost imperceptible at first, whispered her name. Laura. The voice was barely audible, but she heard it clearly, a whisper just behind her, as though someone stood in the room with her. Heart racing, Laura turned, but no one was there. The room was empty, save for the dim light of the chandelier casting long shadows on the walls. The whispers continued over the next few days, always at night. They were like faint murmurs just beyond the reach of her hearing. Yet every time she tried to sleep, they grew louder. They never said much, just random words, names, places, half sentences. But each night, they seemed more desperate. Then came the scratching. At first, it was a soft sound, like fingernails dragging across wood, but then it grew more violent. The sound reverberated through the walls, almost as though something or someone was trying to get out. Laura couldn't stand it anymore. On the fifth night of constant whispers and scratching, she couldn't resist any longer. She stood up, grabbed a hammer from her toolbox, and approached the wall where the sound had been the loudest. With a single swing, she struck the plaster. It cracked, revealing a hollow space inside the wall. Her heart pounded in her chest as she struck again, widening the hole. Dust and bits of crumbling plaster fell to the floor, and the whispers grew louder, more frantic, like a chorus of voices screaming to be freed. And then she saw them. Pale, twisted faces stared back at her from inside the wall, their eyes wide with terror, their mouths open in silent screams. They were pressed up against the plaster, their features distorted and contorted in ways that didn't seem human. They were trapped, imprisoned within the walls of the house, their faces frozen in eternal fear. "Help us," one of them whispered, its voice faint but unmistakable. "We are forgotten." Laura staggered backward, horror flooding her mind. She wanted to run, to escape, but she couldn't move. Her eyes locked onto the faces in the wall, and the whispers seemed to reach into her mind, urging her to listen, to understand. But the more she tried to pull away, the stronger the pull became. The voices weren't just coming from the wall. They were inside her head now, growing louder and more insistent. "Please help us," they begged, their eyes pleading. "You must set us free." The air around her grew colder, and she felt the walls closing in. The faces pressed harder against the plaster, their cold breath seeping into her skin. Their fingers, long and skeletal, reached out, their touch icy and bone-chilling. With a final, desperate cry, the walls seemed to fold inward, and Laura felt herself being pulled toward them. The voices screamed louder now, the sound deafening, as the walls closed in on her. Her heart raced, her body trembled, but she couldn't move. The darkness swallowed her whole. The next morning, The house was eerily quiet. There was no sign of Laura, no trace of the horrors she had witnessed. Her room was pristine, the walls unbroken. It was as though nothing had happened at all. But the house was different now. It felt colder, heavier. The silence was oppressive, and in the stillness of the walls, a faint scratching could be heard, slowly growing louder. It wasn't the wind. It wasn't the house settling. The whispers had returned, and now they were looking for someone new. If you listen closely enough, you might hear them too, the faint, desperate whispers that claw at your sanity, begging you to help them, to free them. But be warned, once you hear the whispers, there is no turning back. You will become a part of their story. You will become the next forgotten soul trapped within the walls.